Hello and welcome. For China Solved, I'm Andrew Hubert, and this is the China Negotiator. So you're in a trade war, episode 37. When both sides blink, it looks just like young love. What are we talking about today? Well, both sides seem to have blinked. Is this a caravan, a wall, or the pen? The newest normal. Let's look at each one of those in a little more detail. Number one, did they both blink, or are they batting their eyes at each other? Meng Wanzhou is going home. She was given bail from a Canadian court and is on her way back to China. A Canadian diplomat has gone missing in China. I'm sure that's a coincidence. And the fact that Meng Wanzhou is out on bail means this whole thing can come back in a few weeks, or it could fizzle out completely. Remember, she was arrested by the Canadians, and that's who issued bail, so that's where she'll be returning for that trial. Meanwhile, China has lowered its punitive tariff on U.S. cars coming from the United States into the China market, and those tariffs have come down from about 40% to 15%. The question of, does China want more U.S. cars, and don't Chinese people have access to U.S. cars built in China already? That's not important. This could be a big win. Let's watch the Dow when it opens on December 12th, and I'm taking this as a good sign, cautiously. Did Trump offer to get involved in the Meng Wanzhou case? Well, we saw headlines saying that he was willing to get involved, so maybe he did. I don't know. We're used to this already. This would have been a huge deal in any other administration. But this is just the new normal, and we're looking at this as a smoke signal that Lighthizer, Bolton, and Navarro are, if not out of the picture, at least taking a lower profile. Tune in next week for more details on the reality show U.S.-China Tradewar. So does this give us any more light on where this negotiation, where this relationship might be headed? Well, we don't get much news from the White House, so we have to do a little analysis and look for signs where we can find them. This administration has three basic negotiating tracks. It rallies the base, it goes on symbolic crusades, and it takes quick, decisive action. To caravan something nowadays is to grab headlines with a dramatic story of life-threatening import for a couple of days and then never speak of it again. Can the China story be caravanned? Yes, quite easily with almost no inconvenience. It's not even making headlines on its own now. The only time the media pays any attention to the China trade war is when it has a direct impact on the Dow Jones levels. The arrest was the most exciting element of the whole story, and if Meng Wanzhou goes back to China, we're not going to hear from her for a long time. The wall springs eternal. The second big approach is the wall. With the wall, you are making big claims about an imminent threat. There's always confusion about who is actually footing the bill, and this usually takes the form of a campaign promise, even if the campaign's over. And this will be the compromise. If the U.S. decides it does want to fizzle this, it's going to fizzle it with this kind of approach. The wall represents a symbolic cause, but the costs are real. And as costs mount up, it's very easy to move on to another symbolic cause. So right now you're seeing the government shutdown is becoming a big priority, and that is pushing China off the headlines. If there's going to be a compromise, this is how it's going to look. The only people who really believe in the campaign promise approach are pretty easily satisfied with symbolic gains. And I think both sides are starting to recognize that in this case. Trump likes to sign these executive orders on TV. You'll remember his greatest hits like pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord, pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and pulling out of the Iran Treaty. If sanctions and executive order are ever used in the same sentence about China, is very, very bad news. The newest normal. It's all about that base, and this story isn't really working for the base. China is not making headlines on its own, and I think there's a little bit of fatigue with the whole story, as China tends to do. People get China fatigue pretty quickly. And the administration knows its base, and it knows that cost-free symbolic wins are better than expensive, drawn-out conflicts that have to be explained. So I'm looking for a cost-free symbolic win on this one. Watch the players. You'll be hearing more about Kudlow and Mnuchin. And that will mean that we are going to make deals on trade, and we're going to push security and legal issues off the headlines and into the back rooms. The U.S. has not done very well with this approach in the past. This has been the normal approach up until 2 years ago. So watch the triad for signs of which direction this is going. If Lighthizer and Navarro are front and center and presenting the messages on China, then you should dig in for a long trade war. But if you stop hearing from them, and if Bolton pops up on TV talking about Russia or some other region or the UN, then it may be an indication that Trump is getting ready to fizzle on the China Cold War and move on to something else. Will we just go back to business after that? Well, it'll be the same but different. Up and out of China still holds. If you are manufacturing or sourcing in China, then you're probably climbing the tech ladder, or you'll be moving out of coastal China and heading to places like Cambodia and Vietnam within 2 to 5 years. Up and out is not necessarily bad news for you. It just means that you'll be getting priced or teched out of coastal Chinese manufacturing centers. China is going to appear very conciliatory and smiling on the surface, but they're still going to be concentrating on building new alliances with other countries, possibly on the OBOR map and possibly not. And they'll still be looking to climb that tech ladder and build their own technologies independent of the US or the West as quickly as possible. A final word. The trade war and the associated tensions seem to be Beijing's #1 priority right now. And as is common, the learning curve on the Chinese side is steeper than on the Western side. In Washington, the China trade war is appearing as like the number 4 or 5 priority on any given day, as Washington deals with more pressing matters. So the U.S. side doesn't seem to be pulling in a single direction, and people are wondering if we really have the stomach for this. Shock and awe work great at shocking and awing people, but then they respond. And when China responds, it tends to be behind the scenes. And I expect that's what happened in Vancouver. Going forward, I expect the Chinese to focus on manipulating Trump on an emotional level by giving him a lot of wins and giving him face, in Chinese terms, and also pursuing divide and conquer techniques by putting on a public show with Kudlow and Mnuchin, but really functioning behind the scenes and beneath the surface to subvert the agendas of Lighthizer and Navarro. Thanks very much. For ChinaSolved, I'm Andrew Hubert. If you found this useful, please like and subscribe on YouTube and join the ChinaSolved group on LinkedIn. For further reading, check out The Fragile Bridge, which talks about conflict management in China, and 10 Common Chinese Negotiating Mistakes, which is about negotiating mistakes that are common. Thanks again. I'll talk to you soon.